Hello, welcome to Found Footage. I am Siobhan, I'm joined by Casey.
Hi, I'm Casey.
I like how you have a little pause before you're like, ready, 3, 2, it's my time.
I
Um,
just need to make sure so we're not talking over each other all the time.
that's fair. I cut out any, like, tiny indiscretions anyway, so it's fine. So today we were going to watch a different movie than we ended up watching, but they took it off of Netflix. Because, as I said last time, I was going to let Casey pick the film.
So, my second choice was this movie called Temple.
Yeah,
It was a movie.
it was a movie. I quite liked some of the aesthetics of how it was shot. I mean, it looked nice enough.
Yeah, I think, like, not diving too deep just now, but I think a lot of it was, we've got an idea. We want to film in Japan. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, it's pretty much, I want to shoot a quote unquote scary film in Japan. Let's just fucking go. So Temple is from 2017 and it was directed by first time director Michael Barrett, who I don't really know what else he's done, not seen any of his other work, as well as with the main three actors Logan Huffman, Natalia Warner, and Brandon Tyler Sklenar. I looked to see if I'd seen anything else that they were in, and it turns out I haven't. So before we watch this, I decided to check and see what the general sort of consensus was, and it has a 27% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 23% rating on Metacritic. So we thought we were in for just a really good ride.
Yeah.
Casey was like, this is going to be the perfect film to watch. It's going to be amazing. It also apparently had a budget of 3.4 million.
That's kind of a lot of a lot of movie money.
It's a lot of movie money for the content we got. I think there were some bits where it was like, okay, they probably spent money on that, and okay, they probably spent money on that. They probably spent a lot of money going to Japan.
I was going to say a lot of it will have most likely been location money.
Location, location, location.
That
Yeah.
makes a film.
So the basic plot of the movie is three unsuspecting Americans visit a mysterious mountain shrine in Japan despite warnings from locals to stay away. Even though nobody expressly is like, don't go there, stay away. They're just like,
Yeah.
no, not good.
Yeah, it was a lot of unlucky place.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
Ha ha ha, bad thing, me no like.
But nobody was like, oh no, don't go there.
Yeah.
Against your better judgment.
Yeah. So we open up the film with a little title card, a little time, present day in Tochigi Prefecture, Japan. Now I will have butchered that because I butchered like the French on the As Above episode, and I will butcher the Japanese here, but luckily there's not that much Japanese for me to butcher, I don't think. None that I've written down, really.
I think you've got like maybe 3 or 4 things that you can butcher, so it's alright.
It's okay, I would like to say that I'm sorry to the Japanese people for butchering your language. But yeah, so when we open up, it tells us where we are, present day, and then there's a bunch of folks with torches that are a search party looking for something, and then you get a shot where they sort of come across a video camera on the floor, and then they're still sort of searching around a little bit. And then one lady looks into this building, which later on we'll discover that this is the temple, and she hears growling, and she looks up at something, screams, and it cuts to opening titles.
Yeah, and the opening title is a lot of old newspapers, and it kind of just gives you all the backstory you really need there. Like,
Yeah,
really...
it did give you backstory, but I felt like it didn't give you as much as it thought it was giving you.
I think it was a lot of 1968, 6 missing children,
Yeah.
and then we've repeated the same circle of you need to remember that there were 6 children missing in 1968.
Yeah, it's very much the information that I got, and then I also got something along the lines of monk in a temple, and then, I don't know, 2010, ominous things happen or something. But I don't know if all of those things go together because and my brain doesn't work. So that is pretty much what I got. It was 1968, 6 kids missing, monk in a temple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty decent summary of what we've got so far. And then we sort of cut to a man on the phone. He's in some sort of facility. He seems quite a professional guy. It seems quite a sterile place. And then we see a man being wheeled in a wheelchair down the corridor in the same place, and it's got like a plastic sort of cover over it. Kind of like if you've seen elderly people on like those buggies that they used to get around, and some of them have like rain covers over them. That's the kind of rain cover that was over the wheelchair. I don't know if it wasn't a rain cover, obviously, but that's like what it looked like.
Do you know what it reminded me? And I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, but it's got Jake Gyllenhaal in it, I'm sure. And it's called Bubble Boy.
No, I've never seen it. But isn't there also a John Travolta movie called like The Boy in the Plastic Bubble?
I'm sure there is. I've never seen that one though.
I've not seen it either. It just rings a bell.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, but no, you do kind of get that sense where it's like, oh, he has to be encased in this sterile area.
Yeah.
So the subtitles refer to the man as the Faceless, and he's being interviewed by the Japanese man who was on the phone and a translator so that they can converse, because obviously this isn't a Japanese guy, he's some form of American or something. He's obviously one of our 3 tourists. We don't know which one yet at this point, but it's pretty obvious that that's who he is. And it looks like the skin from his face is gone, although you can't see particularly clearly because there's like the sheet of plastic in front of him. So then it sort of cuts to camera footage of Kate, who is the girl, one of our protagonists, if you can call them protagonists, played by Natalie Warner, and she talks about her boyfriend and her pal Chris, who, when she was on her little sort of monologue thing, I thought that they were the same person to begin with, because it didn't particularly make it clear that she was talking about 2 different people.
Yeah, it was a little confusing. I never really caught the name drop of her boyfriend.
I don't think it dropped the name there. Like, because to begin with, my note said, oh, she talks about her friend slash boyfriend Chris, because I swear to God, she didn't mention a second name there. But Chris speaks Japanese, and it turns out that he's been having a hard time because his brother died in a horrific accident the year before, and she's like, he needs this trip. This is before, obviously, realizing that they were different dudes, which doesn't really make much of a difference at this point, but it just would be nice if there was a little bit more clarity.
Yeah, this is also a point where you get really bad exposition, just like a load of information dropped right off the bat. Like,
yeah, from this footage of this random girl on the laptop screen in front of the man in the translator, who I will refer to as the man in the translator, even though I'm pretty sure that they have names. I just don't want to be butchering names of characters that we only speak to for a little bit. So it then sort of cuts to a card saying Tokyo 5 days earlier, and then she's in a cab going to meet her boyfriend at a fancy hotel with Chris, her pal, who she's obviously like met up from the airport or whatever. And this is when I've got written down that the boyfriend is named James, because it came up saying it in the subtitles.
Right. I never got until I asked you, maybe minutes later.
Yeah, you were like, wait, did he have a name? And yeah, so she never actually said his name out loud, I'm pretty sure, but it said in the subtitles, like, James, because that's who was speaking. But he seems, like, at this point, he seems alright. He seems like he's probably a bit of a douche. He just gives you that sort of douchey boyfriend vibe.
Like, frat boy vibe, almost.
Yeah. We discover a little bit later on that he is a dickhole. But then again, I don't think Kate's a particularly decent character either.
No, if I'm entirely honest with you, I felt like all of these characters were like really unlikable, and Chris was maybe the most forgivable.
Yeah, so like there was up until like a certain point in the film, I'm like, oh, Chris just seems like he just wants to hang out with his pal. He's been having a hard time. He seems like he is, out of the 3, he is the most redeemable character, I find. But there is a point where he films the other 2 doing the deed, and I'm like, that's not cool, dude.
That's like really inappropriate.
Yeah, one, that's not cool, but also, why the fuck are they fucking in the same room as him?
Yeah, that entire scene was really awkward.
Yeah, I figured we probably could have done without it.
But definitely, I think they just wanted to like hammer in the fact like Chris is enamored with Kate. But I feel like, I mean, we already got that like probably 5 minutes into like seeing their dynamic. We really didn't need that.
Yeah, but to bring us back to where we are currently, after they meet boyfriend guy, James, at the hotel, there's like a little Japan montage where they go for a walk and they get some noodles and they like go to a store. And it's pretty cool. It sort of gives you a little tour of Japan, which is nice. I've never been.
Either have I. It was really nice because I mean all the scenery was really lovely.
Yeah, like you can tell that like obviously they actually were shooting in Japan for this and stuff. It was just really nice. And then it sort of cuts to them in their hotel room, and boyfriend is all like, having a male friend that hasn't tried to fuck you, that's pretty weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's essentially like, isn't it weird that you've been friends with this guy for since you were in kindergarten, I think she says earlier.
Yeah, and then he's like, I mean, I can't believe he's not ever tried anything with you. Which is saying, you can have friends without fancying them. I'm sure that's a thing we're all capable of.
Oh, like 100%. But I don't know whether it's just like, I'm assuming it's kind of like a straight guy thing where it's like, I cannot be friends with a woman and not want to bang her.
I think that definitely is a straight thing.
Yeah, because like, as the homosexual,
Oh, homosexual!
I find it very easy to be friends with women and not want to bang them.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, it's not more or less something I constantly think about, but,
Yeah,
each to their own, I suppose.
yeah, you straighties do what you want. Everybody's accepted here, I suppose.
Everyone's accepted as we've just spent like maybe 5 minutes bashing on the streets.
Dude, we've only spent like 2 minutes bashing on the streets. I can see
Oh,
the
it's fine.
recording time.
It's fine.
2 minutes is acceptable. So we then sort of cut to them being in what looks like a little thrift store, because it's got like a mismatch of like there's books and there's trinkets and there's clothes, and Kate is looking through these books and she finds a book and it's like a journal type thing, and she's like, ooh, I want to get it because it's like folktales and a journal. And so she's like, oh, I would like to buy this. Only Chris does all the speaking because he can speak Japanese, even though earlier she says, oh, he can speak some Japanese. He speaks pretty much fluent Japanese throughout the entire film.
Yeah. I mean, we can't really guarantee if it's spoken well.
Yeah, but he speaks a lot of Japanese throughout the movie. And so he's like, yeah, can we buy this? The shop lady's like, no, that's a bad book. We're closed now. Please leave.
Yeah.
She's pretty much like, get the fuck out of my shop. I don't want to see your American faces here. And no mo. And then after that, there's a lot of sort of jump cutting from area to area in this movie. So there will be a lot of sentences where I'm just like, and it cuts to. So it cuts to them in the club, as I have written. And
In the club.
yeah. And like, Chris is just like, he's sort of drinking alone. He's sort of and sort of speaking to like this Japanese lady, and the couple are dancing. They're getting a little bit heavy-handed, and then like Chris is like watching them. And then it sort of cuts to him outside, and he's walking back to the store because it's open. And so he walks in, and there is a small boy in the shop, and he's like, "Is there any adults around?" And the boy's like, "It's me. I'm 9."
I run the shop.
Yeah, I run the shop, it's me, I'm an adult. And he's like, okay, that's fair. Can I buy this book? And the child's like, blank. She obviously says yeah, because it cuts to Chris going into a small bar with a book in hand, and he's like, give me a whiskey. He doesn't say it like that, but he's like,
No, he says it exactly like that.
he's like, give me a whiskey. And then the other bar patron is like, oh no, that's very unlucky, don't go there. Don't go to that shrine, it'll make you sick.
Which I really like how they just kind of got up and they're like, right, so we're just gonna intervene into this guy's life and, see that book that I've only glanced at for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Unlucky. You don't go there.
Yeah, you don't go there. I don't know where it is you're going, but you don't go. You stay at home, small American man. And then the guy behind the bar is like, oh, that's near my village, and gives him, like, the address of the village, or, like, the area, or the name of the village, something like that.
Which is exactly like, no one's telling him not to go.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, it's unlucky. Right, well, give me your hand, I'll write down the address.
Yeah, pretty much. And then before the other bar goer patron man, he's just credited as man in the bar, he is like, do not go. Many other temples in Japan. And then just fucking leaves. And so Chris is back outside, and he's trying to get a drink from a vending machine, and he drops his coins on the floor. And then I've just got homeless woman jump scare, because a homeless woman jumps up from under some trash bags and scares him.
Yeah. And then they, like, narrow in on the fact that she's actually got horns, so she's not just a homeless lady.
She's a spooky homeless lady entity. And then it sort of drills into the fact that it looks down and she doesn't have any eyeballs in her sockets, which she did before. And then there is what I have written down as a line of basket head boys.
I put basket men.
Oh, we're so in sync. Basket head boys, not entirely sure if they're there or not. They could just actually be dudes walking around, or it could be some sort of fucked up image in Chris's imagination. But they sort of are walking down the street, sort of chanting and singing. And it then cuts again, obviously, because there's so many cuts in this movie, where it goes back to the place that they're staying in. And there is, like, a slight shot of a creepy claw shadow thing behind Chris, and then he wakes up. He wakes up, and Kate is, like, looking at the book, and is like, oh, how'd you get this? And he's like, ha ha ha, wouldn't you like to know? And then he's like, oh, I've got a headache. And Kate's like, oh, yeah, James said that you made a friend last night. And he's like, what? I don't know what you're talking about.
Then you get this awkward little, like, exchange between Chris and James, where James is like, yo, I know, like, I've known you for maybe 2 or 3 days now, but don't rat on the fact that I was cheating with your best friends. And Chris is like, ha ha ha. Move on to the next subject.
Ha ha ha. And then it jump cuts again to them taking a cab ride to their next destination. It's quite a nicely shot from above. They're winding through, like, these little Japan back roads. I think that most of my favourite parts of this movie are, like, the scenic shots.
Yeah, I agree. But, like, I will say that shot specifically really reminded me of the kid riding the bike in Goosebumps, and that's all I could think of the entire time watching.
Were you just like, it's Goosebumps? It's just Goosebumps? Yeah.
It didn't help that, like, when you got the, like, creepy hand cloth imagery,
yeah,
I was like, that also looks like it should be in Goosebumps.
So essentially, this is just a large extended episode of Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Goosebumps podcast. But yeah, so they arrive at this little village and they speak to an old woman who is sweeping her porch. And Chris is like, is there anywhere we can stay? She's like, oh, you might get rooms up at the restaurant. Which is fine. They start making their way up. And then they speak to an old man who tells them about Hitoshi, how they should speak to him, and how he went to the temple when he was younger and he had visions and he came back holding his eyes. And Chris is like, oh, puts his hands over his eyes like he came back holding his eyes. And the guy is like, no, and he picks up 2 oranges, holds them in his hand, and is like this.
Yeah.
To which Kate is like, wait, what's he on about? And Chris is like, I don't really understand him, I can't tell. And it's like, you've been speaking fluent Japanese this entire fucking movie. You know exactly what he means.
Exactly.
You know like, I know what he means. You know what I mean?
I know what he means.
Yeah, everybody knows what he means. The thing is, Kate should fucking know what he means. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You would think that, like, that's not a language barrier thing. If he's like, no, not like this, like this. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, well, clear. Yeah. Sorry, you
He'd
go.
already explained how he was holding his eyes, so it's just inference.
Yeah, it's ignorant, which is your new best friend. So yeah, their next point of call is that they find their rooms sleeping at the restaurant, and then when they're walking past, he looks into a room and there is a man sitting there, like, I don't know, drinking soup. And we assume him to be Hitoshi. We don't 100% know at this point, but he looks around to where Chris is, and he has no eyes. So, you know, it's power of deduction. We know that Hitoshi has no eyes, and this man has no eyes. And then I've got couple goes for a walk, and then tasty sake.
That's also pretty much what I have.
Yeah. Because the other two fuck off and are like, we're gonna go for a walk. And then Chris is just sort of sat in their room, and the lady who owns the restaurant like brings their blankets and is like, do you want to come for some sake? And he's like, yeah. So he brings his camera with him to go with her, and they have some sake. And then the lady sort of speaks a little bit. The bits that I mainly caught were that the quarry closed, nobody went to the temple anymore, and there was like ghost sounds, and she's like, oh, did you say something? And he's like, no.
Yeah, she just stared off distantly into the corner.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, this is also like point number 2 where we've got really bad exposition thrown in.
Yeah. 100%. Like, it doesn't feel natural at all. It feels very much like, throw down a piece of info.
Yeah. I mean, she took like one sip of her sake, mentioned all of this, then was like, I'm gonna go make your bed!
Yeah.
And
Like, I also didn't make a note of it, but there is a wee dog in the background who looks like he's having the time of his life.
yeah, he was really cute.
Yeah. So, I can say for a fact that if you think about watching this movie, there is a dog and he doesn't die, so that's points.
Exactly. I mean, I know I base my movie watching over whether or not the dog dies.
Yeah. So the lady sort of disappears to go and make their beds, and then the kid is there again. And Chris is like, hey, what are you doing here? And the kid's like, oh, I live here. What are you doing here?
He lives in this random village, but also
Works
runs the shop.
Yeah, it also works at the shop. And he's like, oh, well, I used to play at the temple when I was a kid. He is a kid. He's 9. He's like, I can take you there. Do you want me to take you there? And he's like, yeah. So he's like, yeah, 9-year-old. You take me on an adventure.
9-year-old tour guide.
9-year-old tour guide. And then Chris goes and outside and he speaks to Hitoshi, who gives you a lot more of exposition just sort of dumped on you, although it makes a little bit more sense this time around because he's specifically asking Hitoshi about it because the old man was like, speak to Hitoshi. He has been there. You know what I mean? He's witnessed things. He has no eyes.
But he can still see.
He can still see with his mind. Can he actually still see?
No, that was me being sarcastic because he says that he's seen things and he's
Oh.
always.
My brain don't work good. So he speaks to Hitoshi, and Hitoshi's like, there was missing children, and a search party went to look for them, but they found like a wandering monk who was like answering their questions, but nobody believed what he was saying, so he must have been like, no, I'm innocent, I've had nothing to do with this. But they didn't believe him, so they killed him, and they never found the children, so every year they burn candles to pray for the children to return. And this just all sounds like hefty, like, oh, we're gonna have spooky children in a fucking Japanese horror movie, which is a little bit of a cliche.
A little bit.
Only a little bit, but like it still works. Like, it's one thing where if you're gonna watch a Japanese horror movie and it's about ghost kids, like, it's gonna work. You know what I mean? Because they generally do it justice. Like, it's a trope of their sort of own design and they do it justice, so why not?
It works. It's spooky, nonetheless.
Yeah. Big spooky.
We love a good spooky child.
We love a spooky Wayne. And for the non-Scottish people out there, that is a child. But yeah, so this is when we jump cut to Kate and James shagging with Chris recording it, which is uncomfortable. You're shagging in the room with your best pal there, and he's videoing it, and it's like, there is enough light in that room coming through, like, where the window and the door is, sort of thing, that you would be able to see.
Yeah.
But that's what's happening.
I mean, throughout the film, Chris has been videoing them, like, being dead romantic a lot anyways, but, like, that really just takes the cake.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he's getting cute shots of, like, they were, like, napping in the cab, and he's, like, turned around taking a video of them, and I'm like, oh, well, that's, like, a little bit weird, but also, like, it'll be cute, like, You know what I mean? Like, oh, look, you guys were asleep. You know what I mean? Or they're walking ahead of him holding hands, and it's like he's getting shots of, like, the Japanese street with them walking ahead of him. I'm like, oh, well, that's, like, quite a nice shot.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit, just a little bit, you know, not cool.
And with, like, the night camera on as
Yeah.
well.
But, like, the camera also has, like, this little red light on the top, and it's like, dude, if you see nothing else, you're gonna see that fucking red light.
Yeah. It was just weird.
Yeah.
And then James calls him out for it as well, but not, like, specifically, like, I knew you were videoing, but, like, do you enjoy the show? Like,
Yeah.
I know you're awake and watching. And it's like, then why were you doing it?
Yeah. Not for me, I'm afraid.
No, I mean, I wouldn't do that.
So then I have the same note as you, but for, like you said it earlier, 9-year-old tour guide.
Yeah.
And we find out that the boy's name is Saita. And then there's a couple of, like, subtitle lines over the footage of them beginning their walk up the hill of the faceless man. But he doesn't say anything particularly interesting. He's just the one that sort of tells you that that's the boy's name, and he's the one that took them up the hill. Because he's obviously still speaking to this other guy in the translator. And at this point, I've got the note. I'm 100% sure that it's Chris at this point. Like, I'm almost 100% sure that that's who the faceless man is. Mm-hmm. Even though you can't really tell from the voice, because the voice of the faceless man is a bit more strained.
He's gone all grovelly, like Bruce Wayne when he goes in Batman mode.
Yeah. I'm Batman.
I'm Chris.
My name's Chris. I'm rocking up a mountain. So yeah, they're all going up the hill, and then, like, to begin with, Chris is ahead with Saita, and the couple are behind, and then James is sort of up ahead with the wee boy, and then Chris and Kate are behind, and she's like, ooh, chilly, and he's like, here you go, here's my jacket. Which you would do, you know what I mean? That's your friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I'd give you my jacket.
I'm sure you give me a jacket, like, all the time.
Probably. But yeah, then James has a line where it's like, oh, you have no idea how many of my shirts have mysteriously disappeared. But I thought he was aiming it at, like, Chris had stolen his shirts to begin with.
Yeah, it wasn't worded really well. Like, there were hundreds of other phrases that he could have said that would have flowed a lot more naturally.
Yeah, like, oh ho ho, good luck getting that back. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Or like, watch her, she likes to steal clothes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it definitely sounded like he was like, oh yeah, Chris has been stealing my clothes.
So I think the moral of this story is that, I mean, instead of Chris peeping on Kate specifically, he's peeping on Jane.
Yeah.
And they've just got this sexual, and that's where, like, all the awkwardness stems.
Did you say sexual tension? Because you cut out a little bit.
I did say sexual tension.
Excellent. Just so we're all clear. So they get to the top, there's like a little shrine altar thing. It's not like the temple, but it's like a little bit on the way. And so the wee boy is like, oh, pray. So Chris and the little boy, like, pray, and Kate's like, oh, this is adorable, and just, like, videoing them doing, like, this prayer. And then James is like, I'm going for a piss. So he's left to go for a pee-pee. And then they're like, oh, let's go find James. He's been peeing for an awfully long time. And you're like, oh, maybe something bad's happened to him. Wouldn't that be a shame? But no, it turns out that James has found like some sort of abandoned mine. And he's like, oh, let's just go in and explore it. And Kate's like, no, I want to go to the temple first. Because she's basing her thesis on this temple and, like, different temples and temple prayer and religion and stuff in Japan. And he's like, oh, but come on, we might never find it again. He's like, I want to go on an adventure, and your fucking trip to this temple is boring the tits off of me.
Yeah, I mean, genuine douchebag.
Yeah. So Kate's essentially just like, nah, we're here for the temple, motherfucker. But she ties, like, a scarf she has around a tree nearby so that they can find it on the way back down, so they can go for a look.
Which is, like, mega foreshadowing.
Foreshadow. And yeah, the next point along, they find a kitsune statue, and I think it's Chris who says it's a shapeshifter who defends the temple. Because I can't remember whether it's Chris or the kid who says it, but I think it's Chris, because he's telling the others. And then they get to the temple, and they're there for like a little bit, and the wee boy's like, look, I have to go. And Chris is like, oh, can you get home by yourself? And he's like, yeah, don't worry. So the little boy just fucks off and goes home by himself, which is fine. Obviously, he's 9, he runs a business.
He knows the world.
Well, to be fair, he's the one that took them there, so he'd have an easier time getting back than they will.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, couple time, because Chris goes inside to have a little look inside the temple, and Kate, with James, is looking at these little mounds of rocks, and she's like, oh, they're almost like little grave markers. And he makes a joke about how he's like, oh, well, maybe the monk made them for his victims. And she's like, is that supposed to be a fucking joke? And he's like, well, it was, and then I heard it out loud, and so maybe no. It's almost 100% like, if you had laughed, it would have been a joke, and if not, I'm sorry, it was an accident. And then there's like some shots of like camera footage from both Kate's perspective and Chris's perspective, like both inside and outside, and there's like some spooky noises, and there's like a little shadows moving on like Kate's end, and Kate gets a bit spooked, and it's like, oh, it's time to bail, you fucks. But then she and James hear like a scream from inside the temple, and Chris is getting pulled through the floorboards inside this temple. Like, we can see a hand, obviously nobody else has seen a hand, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he gets pulled through these floorboards, and he's like mildly unconscious when they get there, but he's not actually fallen that far.
No, Kate's like, check if he's still breathing.
Check if he's alive! And it's like, alright, he's maybe bumped his head and has like knocked himself out, but I don't think he would be dead from that fall.
It was genuinely like 5 feet.
Yeah, like even if he landed funny, I don't, like, okay, right, if you landed funny you could probably die, but I don't think that, like, there's any way that he specifically would have died from that fall. But yeah, it turns out that he's broken his leg, and so they make a makeshift splint for it, and they decide to hunker down for the night at the temple, so they make like a fire outside, and they're all chilling out around this fire, and James decides to go walkies. And then I've got, in brackets, the note, fireside friendship.
Fireside friendship.
Fireside friendship. And it turns out that James is actually kind of creeping on their conversation from far away. And we learn during conversation that Kate had an abortion of James's baby and has never told James, but Chris is the only person who knows about it. So, like, okay, didn't really need that information. It doesn't add to the story in any way.
Yeah, it was really random, and it was almost as if they threw it in there like, well, we need a reason why they're all gonna fuck off into their own kind of direction.
Yeah. We need a reason for them to split up, not ignoring the fact that the guy's already gone for a fucking walk. He could have just gone for a walk and gotten lost in the fucking woods. Like,
exactly.
Like, obviously, like, that's a dumb, ridiculous horror movie trope, but it works. It works better than being like, I had an abortion and I've never told him. And then she says, like, oh, I'll tell him when we get back. And then James appears and flashes the torch in her face like he's fucking interviewing her, and is like, tell me what? Because obviously he's fucking heard, pretty much, you know what I mean? Because he was creeping. And so he has a hissy fit, and he leaves. It's like, I'm going back to the village, I'll send somebody to help you in the morning. And then Kate's like, oh, we're gonna need more firewood, so she fucks off to go get firewood. And Chris is just sort of lying beside this fire with his leg in a splint, like, well, this is this is a great day. So on his walk, James finds the Kitsune statue, and he's walking past it, and he tells it to fuck itself. And Kate's torch goes out when she's looking for firewood, and she sort of begins to cry, and then there's like ghost kids there. She doesn't see them, we do though. And then it just sort of cuts back to the campfire and Kate getting there to Chris, and it's just like, this place isn't right. My flashlight turned off.
My flashlight died.
My flashlight died. This place is wrong. And then I've got platonic ? Cuddling.
Yeah, like, I mean, they're all really unlikable, and I think really hammers in
that, like, none of them are particularly decent characters.
Yeah.
Because you don't really, when anything happens to them, I don't really feel for them.
No, and like, I'm not saying people can't be platonic and like cuddle, you know,
Yeah.
because that's totally a thing. Like, I totally go for it. But I mean, she's just hidden the fact that she had an abortion from her boyfriend.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is something you should have discussed. Like, ultimately, it is your body and it's your choice. But I mean, that's still also.
Yeah,
He
it's
had
like, maybe you should have
no.
just told him, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh. And then she's there like, I know my boyfriend has been uber jealous of this guy, but I'm gonna make him cuddle me.
Yeah. And like, I understand if she was like, here, put your arm around me, will be warmer, because obviously they're outside. Like, that,
Yeah.
even a line like that would have made a little bit more sense, but obviously she's just like, nah, if he comes back, he's gonna be jealous. I'm gonna make it that way.
Yeah. Or either that or she was just she's quite self-absorbed, I got the vibe, at
Yeah.
least.
Like, she doesn't really care about the other two guys, she's more there, like, she's more about Kate than she is about the other two.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that's definitely it.
Yeah. And then James ends up back at the statue again, and it sort of comes to life, and then it fucking chases him, which is like a little bit unexpected, because you're like, I thought this was about ghost kids, but now the statue's alive, so, you know.
Yeah.
And then it cuts back to Kate, who hears him scream and runs after him into the dark, and Chris is like, Kate, come back, you know what I mean? Like, that's probably a fucking dumb thing to do, and he falls down the front steps of this temple. He's just like, ah! Because obviously his fucking leg's so broken, it's still in a splint, and he's like, ah!
I mean, I imagine it hurt just a little bit.
Well, I think it would probably hurt a fucking lot. It's just the way that he's like, I will tumble down these stairs. Like, if my leg was broken and you ran off into the woods, I'm not falling down a set of stairs for you. I'm going to sit my ass down and wait for you to come back. Because there's literally nothing I can do, and all I'm going to do is get myself more injured and lost.
I think I'll just like cut all that out and then just not run off, you know?
Yeah.
Save us the
I
hassle.
feel that. You're like, maybe I'll just not run off. Like, you hear somebody else, like, I don't know, who the fuck do we know? Amber. You hear Amber, like, screaming in the woods, and you're like, she can handle herself. I'm not going out there.
If she dies, she dies. It's fine.
Yeah. You're like, bitch, I'm not risking me too.
One of us must survive.
If one of us... Wait, one of us has to survive. Somebody needs to feed the dogs.
Exactly.
Yeah, when he's on the floor at the bottom of these stairs, he sees a vision of the monk. It's never stated that that's who it is, but that's pretty obvious that that's what it is. And then it sort of cuts back to, like, James is sort of falling onto the floor, and the statue beast thing is, like, caressing his face. There's romantic tension between James and the statue.
There's romantic tension in, like, James and all of the characters.
Yeah. I'm surprised James and, like, the old man weren't fucking hitting it off, you know what I mean? But Kate gets to, like, the entrance of the mine and sort of goes in. She can hear whimpering and shit, and she ends up, like, heading, like, deeper and deeper into this mine from earlier. And then it cuts back to fucking Chris at the temple, and he's made his way inside. And then there's just, like, ghost kids climbing out of the hole in the floor that he'd fallen in, like, he'd been dragged into earlier. And he looks ready to piss everywhere.
It was pretty accurate. And then all of a sudden, these kids grow, like, sharp teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably one of the coolest makeup things that they had in this.
I would say it's one of the... I think it is one of the coolest, if not the coolest effect in the movie, is just all of these ghost kids who don't have eyes opening their mouths, and there's just, like, fucking sharp teeth there. And it's not like vampire fangs, it's like fucking like... So if anybody's seen the episode of Doctor Who where it's Matt Smith's doctor and they're in Venice, and they think it's vampires, but it's actually like fish aliens, it's like those teeth. I'll send you a picture later, Casey, so you can know what I'm on about. But it's like those kind of teeth.
See, like, I'm thinking, there's a fish in particular, but, like, see, if you're saying that it's a Doctor Who fish alien thing, then obviously I'm thinking of the fish that those aliens are based off of.
Yeah, probably.
Can't name the fish for the life of me.
Yeah, but that's what it looks like. It looks like that sort of fucking stalactite and stalagmite fucking teeth.
Yeah, which is pretty spooky.
That is pretty spooky. I think that's spookier than fangs, is like these fucking abnormal fucking jaws.
Yeah. You know, I agree.
Yeah, fucking jealous. And then we sort of cut back to the shaft, because I didn't want to write mine shaft anymore, because that just seemed like a lot of hassle. And she is just going deeper and fucking deeper, and she sees James standing there, and then she looks like at his face, and he's got no eyes, and part of his face is kind of bloody, but it looks kind of like a naff effect, because it doesn't really look like too much damage has been done to his face. It just looks like he's got like a little bit of skin hanging off.
Yeah.
All of like the other effects go into like making everybody look eyeless, and like the teeth for the children stuff, and even like the effect of the statue. They clearly didn't take as much time into like making his face look like he'd been attacked, really.
Yeah.
So she's screaming and screaming like, can anybody help? And there's nobody fucking there.
No, I mean, like, she's in the middle of a forest and deep in a mine shaft, so...
Yeah, and the closest person to you is either dead James or Chris, who you've left at the temple, who is quite far away, and he's clearly not going to be there because he's fucked his leg. And then she's just sort of like, there's no way out! Then it cuts back to the temple, and there's just screaming. Like, you're seeing it from the outside, there's just like a shadow of Chris, and there's just screaming. And then it's back to the mine shaft, and then there's like distant singing and stuff like that, and she curls up in a little ball. And then it cuts back to the sterile room with the man and the translator, and who we now know is in fact Chris, because they call him Chris. And they're wondering, like, oh, where's Kate? Like, where, like, they're just asking him, like, where's Kate? Like, and he's like, why is Seta here? And they're like, oh, who's that? And he's like, well, it's the boy from the village. He's here, he's out in the hallway. They're like, no, there's no fucking boy. And we know that you killed James. And we see a clip of James being like, Chris, what happened? And Chris, like, from Chris's point of view, grabs a rock and, like, smashes James's face. And so it's like, oh, shit, he did kill James. This makes no sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, this is the part where, like, everything kind of gets muddled up, and you're like, is it supernatural? Is it just Chris is out of his mind and was super obsessed with, like, James and Kate?
Yeah, is it like maybe he suffered a mental break after his brother dying, and this has just sort of tipped him over the edge? But then he breaks out of his, like, plastic bubble, he grabs a pen from the table, and he stabs the translator in the neck with it, and then fucking break the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
And then that's the last you see of him.
That's it. He's just zoomed off. He's gone.
That's him. He's out of there. He's not returning. And then it cuts to, like, a shot of the woman from the village lighting a candle next to a picture of some children, who I assume most of them are, like, the ones that had disappeared. And then it sort of zooms in on the photo, and Seta is one of the kids in the photo. And you get a little slight clip of shots where it's like Seta wasn't there. So in the shop he was speaking to nobody, and when he was in the woman's, like, house where they were staying, he wasn't there. It was just like he thought the woman was talking to the kid, she was speaking to the dog. And then there's one last shot of the temple with, like, some creepy noises, and a last shot of Kate where she's still curled up on the ground, and it sounds like the statue monster is behind her. And then that's it.
Yeah.
So the ending's, like, incredibly ambiguous.
It's almost like they were like, we don't know what ending we want.
Yeah, so we're not really going to do one.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Like, at one point I thought, I mean, while we were speaking about it, and I'm thinking, I'm like, so maybe the idea is that, you know, the Kitsune monster is, like, shape-shifted, because they mentioned that she was a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
So maybe, like, the same situation that happened to the monk all those years ago, like, the monk didn't kill the kids, the shapeshifter did?
Yeah.
Then is that what happens with Chris? But then they completely screw that up by having Chris stab the translator in the neck. Like,
yeah, like,
I mean, that's so many mixed signals.
There's so many mixed signals, and also, like, it's like, was it about a shape-shifting statue? Was it about a curse, like, from this monk who wasn't believed and he got killed? Was it ghost kids doing this entire thing? Is it Chris having, like, a mental break? Is it, like, there's so many different factors that it could be, and I just feel like none of them were really answered.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of, this is what it could be.
Yeah.
But there's not really any evidence. I mean, I even thought that maybe Seita was the kitsune,
Yeah.
but then it shows that he wasn't actually ever there.
Yeah, which also
Which-
which also really confuses me as to how he managed to guide all three of them to the temple. Because if he was just like a figment of Chris's imagination, how did that work? Unless they all envisioned him.
Yeah, and then did they not take a video of Seita and Chris praying together?
Yeah, although
So-
in their little montage of showing that Seta wasn't there, they never showed like that video where it could have just been they thought he was there but he wasn't there and it was just Chris praying by himself.
Yeah.
So there is a lot unanswered. I understand why it got such a low score, but generally it's shot quite well. All of the scenic scenes where they're in Japan, either in the bustling streets or out in like the countryside, are all really nice. That's the most redeeming things that I can really say about it. The characters suck. The only redeeming one is Chris, and he's only really redeeming for like the first bit of the movie, I find.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, they're all quite unlikable.
Yeah. There was like when we were watching it, you were like, oh, like boyfriend guy, oh, I can't wait for him to die.
Yeah, there was.
You were just like, oh, sweet, I can't wait for him to die. And it was like, yeah, that's how I felt about like pretty much this entire movie.
Yeah,
Although I will say the one character I quite liked is I quite liked Seta, even with
I
him
like Seiya.
with him being either a real child or a ghost boy. I quite liked them.
My favorite character was that dog.
That dog, though, he was in the movie for literally like 20 seconds tops, but you know what? Best character.
Honestly?
Yeah. So if you are going to watch this movie, the one way that I would recommend is watch it with like some friends and take the piss out of it. Don't sit down and watch it as like a serious movie because you will be disappointed.
I agree with that. I mean, don't really expect too many laughs either.
Yeah. Don't expect it to be particularly funny. Don't expect the script to be good. The only thing that you can expect from it that it actually delivers on is that you do get to see some beautiful Japanese scenery. That's about it. So yeah, this was The Temple. Or just Temple. It's just Temple, it's not The Temple. This is mostly a note for me later. But next time we will have something hopefully more enjoyable. There's no guarantee that it will be more enjoyable, because one of the movies that we've got picked out, which might be the next one, looks like it's going to be really, really bad, but hopefully it'll be funny. For now, I'm going to say goodbye. So, goodbye.
Bye.